most of the most important things, like showing up for your family, loving well, being selfless, having a servant heart towards the people who mean the most to you, day to day, it's pretty boring. There's not a lot of sizzle. But these are the things that on average tend to lead to the most fulfilling, rewarding, and satisfying life. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Future of Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Aaron Wenzel, and I'm joined once again with the lovely and talented Jennifer Justice.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's amazing.
Good.
What's new?
Oh, well, not much.
Yeah, right. We have so much going on.
We do.
This episode, I'm excited to do. I feel like we probably do it almost every year, and it's on discipline and goal setting. This is a little bit of a fresh spin, though, on how to know what to say yes to. I don't know many people who don't at least think about goal setting in January of every year. It's a reasonable, logical time to think about the new year and reflect on the past year, things that worked well, things that didn't work well, and what you'd like to see in the next coming year. But it's hard not to notice most people fall off their goal pursuit fairly quickly. And I don't pretend to know the answer for everyone. But in my experience, it seems like folks who struggle with setting and achieving goals on a regular basis, whether it's January or not, there seems to be a pattern of an inability to be clear on what they actually want. And so they might pick the wrong goal to achieve, or the right goal but for the wrong reason. And I've helped people and notice this pattern of like, gosh, if I can get people to identify with more clarity the things that are most important, they have a higher likelihood of achieving them. And so we're going to start this episode with talking about goal setting and discipline, and this might surprise some people, but with identifying your values. I personally, in my own life, have found the value in going to my future self and looking backwards and trying to determine how I would measure success in my life. I've been able to kind of uncover these concepts and these virtues, really, that are the most important to me personally. And I find that as I get more clear on those virtues that I'm going to use to measure my life and its success in my current self, they're very useful in goal setting and determining what must be true today if I want a future self that has the ability to measure successfully his life based on these things. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I love it.
We've done it in our practice, creating goals, based off of our core values as a business. Like, who are we? Who are we for? Who are we not for? And really just owning who we are. And there's a great amount of power and momentum. And when we come up with goals, it's much easier to be clear and united on goal setting when we use our core values to help frame that. Give me some thoughts about goal setting, but starting with, am I clear on what is most important to me?
Yeah. In my personal life, weight loss has always been the perpetual goal, seems like. And in the past, you in January, you always say, oh, I'm going to lose 50 pounds this year or whatever. And then you make a SMART goal around it. And then you immediately start to take action on it, maybe. But now I kind of ask myself, well, what do I really want this year? How do I want to show up? How, what is my value around that goal? What does it look like for me to implement that? And like, for one example, one of my values is never skip twice. So if I eat an unhealthy meal, I get right back on track the next one. If I skip a workout or for some reason don't get it in, I get back in the gym the next day. Like, Just
I like that.
never skip twice. And that has really perpetuated me this year toward immense progress with my goals. But that's different than the way I had kind of set goals in the past, if that makes sense. And I always have my future self in mind, like, how do I want my future self to be proud, you know?
Yeah, it's such a healthy process to imagine our ideal self in the future. Like, who do I want to be?
Yeah.
Who do I want to say that I've become?
And then you start to believe that you're that person.
Yeah, and how would that person behave? How would that person sleep, eat, move, love, take risk? You start adopting the behaviors that ideal self would have in order to be that ideal self. And I think it's a very powerful way to begin goal setting.
Yeah.
You know, a lack of that really leaves you high vulnerability for setting goals that are either inconsequential in the long term or meeting the needs or the goals of someone else.
Right.
And which is why you could achieve that goal and really be left feeling pretty dissatisfied. And so saying yes to something is saying no to most everything else. So what we choose to set goals around matter. And I would suggest that a healthy, powerful way to identify the right yeses would be, is that getting you closer or further away to your ideal self? The next area, once you have identified the thing to say yes to, is this concept of discipline, right? I think there's a lot of confusion around discipline, myself included, growing up an athlete, going into the military. Like, discipline, the word, the concept has always been in my life in one way or another, but I never really saw the beauty of it until I've started to age and see the consequences of the freedoms that come from being disciplined. And one of the big things that has kind of or been a revelation for me is that discipline is actually not about willpower. The most disciplined people I know do not have an abnormal amount of willpower. What they have is a life that has been architected in a way where they have to use somewhere between 0 and not much willpower every day to behave in a way that keeps them on track to achieving or maintaining their goals that are important to them. Like, I don't have a weird amount of willpower against cookies.
Right.
The reason I don't eat a lot of cookies, therefore suffer the consequences of eating too many cookies, is that I don't have a world where cookies are regularly right in front of me.
Yeah.
Or I would eat them. Or if I didn't eat them, I would exhaust all of my willpower just not eating cookies, and then I would be left vulnerable for all of the other things that I'm a human and vulnerable to. And so talk to me about how this idea of willpower not being equal to discipline, what that means to you, how you've experienced that, maybe with either yourself or family or patients.
Well, my mom came to visit recently, and she noticed, she made a comment, there's no snacks in your house. Where are the snacks?
And you came from a snacky family,
yeah,
right?
Like, she always had, like potato chips and ice cream are probably her kryptonite, the salty and the sweet. But that really struck me because I was like, wow, I have built an environment in my house that is healthy now, that she, coming from the outside, noticed that and brought it to our attention. And that made me feel really good because, James Clear talks about this in his book, Atomic Habits, you shouldn't rely on willpower, but set your environment up so that you don't have to rely on it, just like you said. And I think, this concept of discipline, we talked about this in another podcast, I think, but there's a difference between consistency and discipline. I think people really put them together. And for me, they're very much separate, that people are consistently inconsistent. They think they're consistent, but they're really not. And they're consistent with habits that don't lead them to their ideal self or their goals. That's where they're most consistent. But the discipline comes in saying no to things over and over.
So that you can be consistent
Right.
to the thing that is most important.
Yeah. Discipline is doing the thing, but doing it consistently over time, that you don't fall off, that it's not about being perfect.
Yeah.
None of us are perfect, but it's just about implementing the things that are going to get you to your goal over and over and over again. And they're boring. Like eating healthy, boring.
Totally.
It can totally be boring.
Saving money is boring.
Boring. Yeah.
Most of the most important things, like showing up for your family, loving well, being selfless, having a servant heart towards the people who mean the most to you, day to day, it's pretty boring. There's not a lot of sizzle. But these are the things that on average tend to lead to the most fulfilling, rewarding, and satisfying life.
Yeah. Didn't your son just realize that you hadn't worked out the other day?
It was yesterday.
Yeah.
I was wrapping up a conversation with my wife as we were kind of getting ready to part ways in the morning. And it was a little early. And my son came downstairs and he was talking to his mother about something. And he looks over at me and goes, why aren't you working out? Because it was 6:30 and I'm always in the gym, in our home gym. And I laughed and I said, well, Daddy has an appointment I need to go to. That's why I'm not in the gym. And he was like, oh, okay. And he walked on and I just kind of chuckled because he's watching.
Yeah.
And
he notices your discipline.
Yeah. Well, last month, I created, our episode was around the 6 things I want my sons to know the most. And, these are the kind of like nerdy dad things that mean a ton to me, where I don't have to, I can deliver an idea and a value that I think is important without speaking, because they're watching.
Yeah.
And demonstrate what discipline and commitment and consistency look like. And then once he has an idea of what they look like, when I add language to it, he'll have full context.
Yeah.
And so that was really fun.
Yeah.
But he noticed, why are you being inconsistent?
Right.
His mind wasn't, why are you not disciplined? This is a break in your consistency. I always see you in the garage grunting and making all kinds of weird noises. And like, that's what I've come to expect. Where is this break coming from? So that was kind of fun.
That was neat.
There's a quote from Nick Saban, who's the head football coach of Alabama. He said something around discipline, and I had to look it up because I didn't want to ruin it. But he says, you either have to handle the pain of discipline or you will deal with the pain of disappointment. And I just have to say, as a phrase that is so powerful and simple and accurate.
It's kind of like choose your heart.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about, long pain versus short pain. And most things that create short pain yield long happiness and pleasure. Short pleasure oftentimes lead to long pain.
Yeah.
And so like there's this inverse of like, to be alive is to have suffering and pain. And you can choose long pain or short suffering or long suffering. When given the chance, I like short.
Yeah.
And so I like that a lot. That leads us into kind of the last phase of accurate goal setting. And this is about taking action and how to measure your progress. I wouldn't say that taking massive action towards your goal is going to be like revolutionary. I think most people, no matter what goal setting technique you like to use, the last step is usually taking massive action towards that thing as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Because time kills all deals. You lose your tailwind, you lose your momentum, and you need that first domino to fall. Rip the Band-Aid off, let's go all in. What I really want to focus on this is something that we've created some content around based on one of my mentors named Dan Sullivan talking about in his book, Gap in the Gain, that humans need to notice progress towards their goals, or we will lose motivation, we will lose the ability to remain consistent and disciplined if we don't see progress. And his thesis is that everyone is measuring wrong. As you begin your journey towards your ideal self, you actually never will achieve your ideal self. It's It's fantasy.
Yeah.
And so if your standard is the ideal self as a measuring stick, you never are any closer to the horizon, no matter how far you move towards the horizon, and you will eventually feel a sense of defeat and dissatisfaction. So if your goal is 100 pounds of weight loss and you lose 87 pounds, instead of celebrating the 87 pounds, yeah, but I'm not at 100.
Yeah.
What in the world? Dan says the way to measure is backwards.
Right.
Once you have your ideal self, you use that as a goal. It's wonderful. The horizon is useful. It's directionally accurate. It tells us where to point our engines. But as we begin the journey of day-to-day consistency to develop discipline, we have to look back at where we started.
Yeah.
Measure backwards. Talk to me about that.
It's kind of timely because I just did a body comp at the gym yesterday.
Oh, you did?
And using our old machine, so all my old body comps were in there.
Oh, yeah, our old...
Yeah,
that's right.
and the one I think I'd done in February was on the new machine. But anyway, we used the old one, and the most recent one was from like 2021. And you could clearly, like, we're measuring backwards, right? Like, we're measuring 2 years ago where I was at that point, and it was like 30 pounds of fat down.
Wow.
Like 10, maybe not 10 pounds of muscle, but some muscle, which is to be expected. But that to me was like a really eye-opening, because I'm always looking at the subjective data or the objective data of
what is the scale telling you?
Like that number, I don't want to be that number anymore. Or I have this goal of a weight on the scale and I'm here, or like my fat mass is way off the scale still. But looking at that one from 2021,
immediately you get what? How did you feel?
I felt so proud and I felt really accomplished, and I'm like, wow, I'm not that person anymore. Like I'm so empowered to be my future self, but measuring backwards meant so much. Yeah. Yeah.
I might not be there, but I can't tell myself I haven't made progress.
Right.
I didn't know that. That is...
I forgot to tell you, sorry.
Perfect timing.
I know. It was great.
Perfect timing. I think whether we're talking about relationship growth or we're talking about financial kind of growth, professional growth, there's so much power in measuring backwards against where you started as you head towards your ideal future self. And I love how comprehensive and holistic this feels and how aligned it is. It just feels accurate.
Yeah.
It
feels authentic, right?
Yeah. And
it takes some skill because you and I both use the term in the gap around each other. Like we can kind of sniff that out in each other.
And by the way, in the gap means I'm noticing that you're disappointed.
Yeah.
Because you're measuring against your ideal self. Right. The gap between you and your ideal self never closes.
Yeah.
So we encourage each other to get out of the gap.
Get out of the gap, right.
And get in the gain, which would be how much have you gained towards your ideal self.
Right.
And life is not about never going in the gap. It's about being better at identifying when you're in the gap so that you can quickly get out of the gap and start measuring correctly. It almost always happens because you're measuring the wrong way. Right. You're measuring to the future and the ideal and not where you started.
Yeah.
The other part that makes this kind of interesting and uniquely challenging is there's a lot of emotional work here. Being a powerful, free-thinking adult, moving towards your ideal self requires truth-telling. And oftentimes truth is very painful. Truth can be scary. Truth also can be elusive and ill-defined, buried. And everyone is at a different place with their ability and capability of telling themselves the truth. But if we can begin, and maybe the first goal for someone might be, I need to be a better truth teller.
Yeah.
And so because in my ideal self, I would like to be able to tell the truth about even things that I'm not super proud of.
Yeah.
Because there's freedom in that.
And I think that brings up a good point of there's value in a coach. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a fitness coach. I have a nutrition coach. We have a business coach that we both work with. If I consider you one of my coaches. You may not want to do that, but, you have to find somebody that looks for your blind spots.
Yeah.
Because you're going to live in a place that's probably not truthful as long as you can. But if they bring that truth to you with empathy and support, I just think it's so valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I always say everybody that you admire has a coach.
Yeah.
We can't watch our own swing.
Right.
And I'm a pretty high self-aware guy, but I also have blind spots.
Yeah.
And, having someone able to, with curiosity and empathy, point out areas that are not aligned with what you have communicated to your coach as being the goal or the ideal self, it's hard to, if you're going to go through the effort of having a coach and they're telling you where the inconsistency or the lack of congruency of behaviors, where your behaviors don't map your goals, many people would benefit from some coaching around this. So anyway, I think that kind of wraps up this episode around discipline and goal setting. The value of knowing what to say yes to, and then how to build discipline through consistency, but not willpower. Ultimately, to get you directionally moving towards your ideal self, but measuring backwards. I hope this lands for somebody, and I hope they're able to take it and apply it in one area of their life, especially at the new year. I also hope everyone has a wonderful 2024.
Yeah.
And we're expecting big things, and we're super excited for what we have going on. And any famous last words, Jen?
Embrace this process. It could, you're really only one choice away from a completely different life. And I hope that for everybody that's looking to make big changes in 2024.
I love it. All right. Till we talk next time.
Bye.
Bye.